Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the HR and Payroll 2.0 podcast. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete. We're going to take a little trip down memory lane, I think, today with your guest from pre-Disney days. Why don't you tell us who you brought?
I am so excited. This is going to be a blast from my Payroll Past and HR Past. I'm brought on my good friend and someone that I admire and just loved working with, Heather Stevenson from UKG. And so, Heather, welcome. I'm so excited to have you. This is long overdue.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. And I'm so excited to meet Julie because, when you hear of someone legendary, you're like, I need to bring them into my circle.
Yes. Her reputation precedes her.
Yeah,
very much.
All right, guys, moving right along.
This is going to be a fun one. Heather and I work together at the Walt Disney Company, and we've got stories to tell. We've been there, done that. We got the T-shirt. I got my T-shirt on today, my Mickey shirt, and so I'm just super excited. Heather's a good friend of mine, and we got a great story about how we reunited after that at a Kronos event, which is crazy. It involves Kelly Clarkson, I think, if I recall correctly.
Right. Nashville sounds like it might have been Nashville. Yeah.
So we got some stories, but So
let's
you want to do the honors?
It's going to be on me to dig out the dirt then, if you guys aren't offering it up today. So
dig away.
There's my challenge, Heather. I think we like to ask the question that we hear all kinds of crazy answers to, which is how on earth did you get into HR and payroll? And why do you stay? And, we find almost nobody tries to be here from the very get-go. So tell us your story.
It's funny, too, because when I first started interviewing people underneath me, I would always say, what brought you to payroll? Because I don't know of any child that grows up and says, I want to work in payroll.
I know.
Maybe we can change that, but very true.
Yeah. So I grew up on Long Island. I went to college, and the school that I went to was known for both accounting and for nursing. And I majored in literature and communications. And my friends all joked with me, like, you realize that you're majoring in unemployment, right? And I'm like, oh, yeah. And it turned out I kind of was. Finding a job was difficult. My mother's sister actually had started her own entertainment payroll company, and my mother was working for them. And my mom was like an executive and putting in crazy hours, and everybody always said, oh, Heather, you're going to go work there. I'm like, no, I'm not. And then eventually it was like, Heather, you need a job.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So started being a payroll processor there. And entertainment payroll is really interesting because it's for like TV shows and movies. And, they only spin up for a couple months and then they're gone. So when it's time for unemployment or workers' comp or employment verification or anything like that, that production company is long gone. So it was a really cool way to kind of come into the business and got to do some cool things. Like I got to go on the set of The Sopranos and sit in Tony's chair in like the therapist's office, and it was fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then moved down to Florida, as so many New Yorkers are apt to do. And when I moved down, it was, I want to work for Disney. And I was like, I want to go work. I literally drove down with a friend, dropped him off at the airport, and then went to casting like, hi, I'm here. Give me a job. And they were like, well, we don't really do that. So I started working in the park. Just to get my foot in the door. Had a couple other payroll jobs around too. And then wound up at Disney. And when I left Disney, I continued with payroll for a while, wound up at another job where it was two people for HR and payroll. So our lines were pretty blurred.
Imagine that.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I was thinking about it too. And at one point, she went on maternity leave, the HR director, and then I was like, all right, I can do this. And then the AP person, who I was also a backup to, went out on medical leave for a little bit.
Oh, my God.
Working Saturdays and Sundays and like, yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Good grief. But that's the reality in a lot of smaller firms, right? Exactly. HR and payroll are wearing a lot of hats. My wife works in a small company. She's part finance, part HR.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. I always
tease
her
trades,
about it.
Right? You got to be the jack
I tell her
of
she's
trades.
Toby. Because she's in this like small, it's very much like The Office. They have this like small kind of like branch away from their main office. And so she's kind of the HR there. And I always joke, I'm like, everybody hates you. They don't. They don't. But anyway, no, it's so awesome, Heather. I think I forgot that you had worked at I think Entertainment Partners, right?
So the company was called Axiom, but
Or
Entertainment
Axiom
Partners was one of our big competitors at the
competitor.
I
time.
was
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
say, I actually know somebody and have worked with them and that has done a couple of stints at Entertainment Partners, which is where I
Yeah.
first heard about the types
Yeah.
of crazy payrolls you guys get.
To describe it, I don't think people understand what the media, at least Hollywood and television and radio and all that is like from a payroll perspective. From the time that I left Disney, I went on to work with a lot of really big companies, massive brands, Eaton and KeyBank and Kraft and some of these others. And every time, right, you would sit down and I would be leading due diligence, right, for often for payroll, sometimes for HR operations. And it would start off with, you need to understand how unique and difficult we are. And I was just like, you have no idea, dude. It's not even like most of this stuff you're doing is so self-inflicted. You haven't even scratched the surface of complexity. We're going to get into some of that complexity and the mission impossible that I think we were under in that environment. But one of the things, I'm going to go back to something you said, Heather, about the recruiting part of Disney, about your draw down to that brand. And I think there's two things that I learned. I always like to think that when I worked somewhere, I always like to think about it as a degree that I captured, right? And at Disney, certainly got a degree in I got a master's degree in shared services. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
But what I got, and transformation. But what I got out of it too was, from a corporate and business perspective, I learned an immense amount about one of the words that I think a lot of people hate is here anymore is the word synergy. But Disney, in my opinion, absolutely invented that word. And they've nailed how to do that, right? How to create a movie, right? And then from that movie, create a ride and create products and create McDonald's, Happy Meals, and then create spots for ESPN and just drip that and infuse that through their whole ecosystem. The distribution power of all of that is what makes them so immensely special as a media entertainment organization. But what I would have always thought was really cool was that ability for people to bend over backwards, right? To trip and fall and knock themselves down to work there. People will literally do almost anything. It's a lifelong dream for some people to work there. And I was just privileged to be hired in as a manager. That's unheard of. And I just had such a great experience with folks like Heather and just all the things that I learned. But it really is an interesting place. And I'd love to see more companies nail that brand, that brand desire.
Yeah, brand and culture. It's a big deal again.
I feel like there were a lot of young people. It seemed like in the mid 2000s that were I want to work for Apple. I want to work for Google. Google was so desirable. And I think that's something that is very special as an organization in your recruiting. If you can nail that, that magnetic draw, it's super, super, super cool. So anyway, I thought you were I forgot, Heather. I thought you were a college, one of the college interns.
No, thank you for that.
Thank God you weren't. Thank God you weren't. Yeah. No, the infamously legendary Disney intern program is crazy. I met someone who was one of the first, a gentleman from the UK who was one of the first programs in the 80s, and he said it was absolutely wild. It's got some legendary stories out of that group, but anyway.
Yeah, my husband went through that. And my
was he one?
Yeah, too. Yeah.
Let's just say that the intern program is where Disney brings a ton of kids out of college, young adults out of college. They bring them, they put them in these, nice dorms, I guess you could call them, on property, I think it is, or near property. And then they're basically working often for the summer between, whatever, for Disney. And honestly, it's a little bit of indentured servitude where you're kind of like working for your living. But for a lot of people, it's great to get on their resume. And especially if you're trying to get into that hospitality management world. But as all things are, you can imagine young folks getting together in Florida and Disney.
Sure,
it gets
right out of college.
It gets a little wild. You know what I mean? So anyway, we'll leave that for another day.
All right. Well, let's get into
Let's
some of the stories we know you guys are ready to dive into.
I know. Let me maybe set the stage here, and then I want to talk about your experience, Heather, and then I want to talk about my experience. And so look, the Walt Disney Company set out to build a shared service center back in, I guess it started right around 2001. I joined like months after it opened. The first work was brought in. It was the Walt Disney World Resort, and the goal was the company. I mean, Disney, like a lot of companies, had just leaned, and they still do. They go all in for the guest. It doesn't matter what it is, the guest first, right? It's in a lot of ways. And they're very employee friendly too, so it's also employee first, but it's very much about the guest. And so the investments in tech and the investments in anything were always guest first, right? Front end facing first. It was never really back office. And if you know the Walt Disney Company, it's a studio. It's a studio that turned on and bought or built theme parks, and then later bought a lot of things like ESPN and entered themselves into some other spaces like cruise lines and whatnot. So the diversification of their business is incredibly rich. They have all kinds of things, and they have this incredibly complex operating environment for HR, for payroll, for anything. It's just a lot of what they do is just very unique, right? It's media. There's a lot of gnarliness to that just because it's in California, a lot of just gnarliness in how that business, the gig economy is operating fundamentally on the backlots of Hollywood. All the things that we've been talking about now as the future of work, they've been doing and living for many, many years. Same day payments, contractors, skill-based, staffing, just all these things that fundamentally other industries do not deal with. And it's complicated and it's very hard. And most of the modern systems do not touch it. It just isn't ready for that. And you've got to kind of work around that in a lot of ways. And so we were deploying SAP at scale in addition to this shared service center. And oh, by the way, Enron happened about midway. So that was a whole other thing. And so now we had management audit and Sarbanes-Oxley and all the pain of that. But we were just going through what I would call just the most rapid, intense, company-wide change that you can imagine. And when I say they implemented SAP, they implemented every module of SAP there was for everything but time and attendance, travel, accounting, procurement. I mean, you name it, they were putting in an SAP application globally to support that. And so what we were doing was we were basically the folks that were going to be leading the payroll side of this. We had some HR as well, like the HR inquiry management sat with us and reported to us. And then we reported out to Burbank into the controller. At the time, that was Tom Staggs. I think he's gone on now. He was a CFO eventually, and then he left. And basically, we were corporate employees working for the company off of the care and feeding of the infrastructure at the Walt Disney World Resort. So our HR, our benefits, all of our, whatever was local, but we were working from the corporate vantage point and basically bringing all of this work in and transitioning it to SAP in a multi-phase sort of shared services build. That was basically being led by a very small cohort of incredibly experienced GE executives. Shout out to those guys. They were shared service leaders way before a lot of companies were doing it, and they knew how to do it really well. And that's where I got my PhD, I feel like, in shared services from those guys. But to suffice it to say, by the way, 9/11 happened in the middle, right at the beginning of all of this. So what is Disney's business? It's travel, right? It's entertainment. Well, guess what we weren't doing when that happened? Traveling and entertaining, right? And so there was just such a shock to the system. This was, I'll ask you, Heather. I mean, in my opinion, particularly with what I was tasked with when I came in was ABC's television network, bringing that body back to the U.S. or bringing back to the shared service center, which was just gnarly in and of itself. It was mission impossible. It really, really was mission impossible. And I'm proud to say we landed on our feet, and it's still operating and running. I mean, there were a lot of other people besides Heather and I that had contributions to it, but that just kind of sets the stage for what we were doing for about 3 to 4 years. And it was intense, just to say the least, right? And so, yeah, Heather, I just want to kind of start there and like set the stage for everyone and just talk about like, what was your experience? When did you come in? And I can't remember exactly. I think I was there a little bit before you, but we got married together, I guess, over cruise lines. And that was fun. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was actually in New York on 9/11. I watched the second plane hit from my office window.
Our project was supposed to start for ABC on 9/10. Our project manager had gone there on 9/10, and then all this happened. My wife was having my son. He was born on 9/12. So I had just started on Labor Day, 9/4 or 5.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, and we were behind, right, because of that and because of some other things. So yeah, crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when did you come in?
I moved down here in like February of 2002. I think I started working in the park in like March of 2002, and I went into shared services, I think like July of that year. Yeah. And that was the whole shared services concept. Like you said, it was so like new and different. And, it was, okay, so you're going to be doing the payroll for Disneyland. I'm like, but no, I'm not moving to California.
I know.
Like,
yes, that's right. We had Disneyland as well at first. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think both the parks came in first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and SAP was, it was really interesting at that point because there was no concept of, like, UI or menu path, like, you had to know the number
Oh,
of the
4.6,
screen.
by the way. Yeah.
Yep,
SAP 4.6. Yes.
yep, and I do
That's how long
remember
ago.
too, yeah, that some every so often, that like an error would pop up that was all
Yeah.
in German, and we had this team of contractors, and this one guy spoke German. We'd be like, "Hey!"
Oh, man. Look, I could go on and on for hours about the complexity and the pain and just the chaos of what we were trying to do. And we were dealing with just wave after wave of challenge,
Yeah,
9/11. So my project started off with, okay, you're going to have like 15 people and you're going to take them to New York and you're going to have a year to do this and you're going to document it on this. We were on GIAC, which ended up being bought by Infor at some point. These mainframe green screen tab systems that I was using in the military. And we were doing this, and we had to lift this incredibly complicated payroll that had been operating on this thing for 30 some years, and we had to bring it back, replicate it, and then we had to fundamentally transfer it from that. And by the way, we had no team, so we had to hire. I had to hire 23 people from scratch. They seeded me a couple of people from Disney, but that were already there. I think from the Disney World payroll and some other things.
mhm,
And then eventually, basically, gave me some seeded folks, and then I drew others from around the market and around the company. So we had to put this team together. But yeah, it was just change was by the hour. It was literally
yeah.
by the hour. So, but just thinking back on all that, Heather, like, what are some of the things you took away, like that you came out with that you kind of still look back and draw on that experience for you personally?
So for me personally, it was the change, like you said. So
Yeah,
like I started working for a Disneyland payroll. A couple of positions got open. I remember, and panel interview, first time for that too.
yeah, yeah.
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 And I wound up getting the Disney Cruise Line payroll position. And I remember the guy who was training me first day said, "Okay, I want you to forget everything you know about payroll."
Yep. Maritime law is a whole other thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Yeah. And then like my boss left and I got reassigned to Pete. And I was excited about that because I knew Pete's team. They were a real close knit team. They loved working for Pete. And even I remember them all like going up to New York for, days and weeks on end. And they did not have the easiest job either because like you
No.
said, they're learning this and trying to replicate this. And they're learning it from people who are like, well, you're taking my job. So, you start to kind of learn empathy
Yeah.
very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Like I'm not doing this to take your job, I promise, and I'm just trying to help. And yeah,
That was one of the key things for me, like that the change management. I got a really good change management lesson there, thankfully. And for me personally, that was we were the devil. We were the devil. We were taking, you couldn't walk down if you were the director of whatever, the controller of, let's say, studio consumer products, right? You couldn't walk down the hallway now and tell the payroll manager what to do. That was a problem, right? Or same thing with AP, anything we were doing. It was a finance shared service center that had incorporated portions of HR. I think we had some of the benefits, the inquiry management, stuff like that, the back office kind of stuff. And the point is that like we were the devil. We were the devil. We were taking control away. And by the way, the management audit thing was getting pinned on us, right? It was us that were having to sell it and position it when it was really the law. And we were learning alongside PwC or whoever we had auditing us. I think it was PwC or EY. And we basically were really trying to go out there and do this. And I think that for me as a leader taught me, like, you got to double down on this communication and this selling, because if you don't, no one's going to buy in. But once they bought in, and it was hard, we had real momentum. We had real traction. And that's where I think I got very believing in data to say, like, okay, we can tell stories with this. We can get people on our side with this. And that's something that I personally learned there too. So yeah, great experiences. But Heather, one of the things I want to talk to you about though, is just this complexity of cruise lines. It scared the hell out of me. When I took that over, I was like, oh my God. I was like, I got enough with Walt Disney. I had Walt Disney World Resort. By the time I got ABC stabilized, right? And keep in mind, we brought in television, we brought in everything in New York, all the owned TV stations, all the sevens, the ABC sevens around the country. So your San Fran, Chicago, New York, I think Philly, some of those are all ABC 7. They're owned by Disney. The affiliates that are not a 7 typically are not owned by Disney. They're not owned, but they're operated in some way or affiliated. We brought all that. We brought all of the Disney Radio Network in. We had Sean Hannity. We had Paul Harvey. We had all of that stuff, which eventually got sold. And much of the soap production in New York and in California, and all these different things. And so once we got all that stabilized, one of the things I really I'm proud of is that we hired. You mentioned it. We hired a stellar team. And I'll just say this: like, I didn't necessarily hire the most experience. I hired the best attitudes. The people who said, I want to learn. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to do what it takes to figure this out, and I'll help you. I'm willing to run through this wall with you and go to war, because that's what we were doing. We were in so many ways like going to war. You know what I mean? And we weren't all going to come back. It felt like, but we did. We brought everybody back, so to speak, and we accomplished the mission. But there were many times I shed tears. I didn't know if we were going to make it. And it was just one thing after the other. But I think what made it really work was the people, like Heather and like others. Pam, right? I know Pam Glad is still, shout out to Pam. She was stellar. We had fantastic people. And I think that had a lot to do with this lens on hiring attitude and personality versus necessarily trying to teach them or bring the payroll expertise in the door.
You guys left a teaser just hanging out there. Heather, share like a few of the, oh my gosh, from Maritime Payroll.
I'm like dating myself a little too, because we didn't have like a way to communicate directly with the ships. So it was an Excel spreadsheet that was just an issue log. And you had to you would write your response and then wait till the next day. And then when they were somewhere and they can send it. And it was just, it's a different kind of
cash
payroll.
payments.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had to learn all about the Philippine workers who were on there and their mandatory retirement program. And it was just we had folks up in Canada, the performers would rehearse up there. And I remember the woman who was in charge was like, I have to I lose 2 hours of rehearsal every Thursday because everybody has to go and cash their check. And I'm like, why do they not have direct deposit? And she's like, that's an excellent question.
Yeah.
And I remember I just figured it out for them. And she sent me a stuffed moose that is somewhere in my house still.
That's awesome. So, culturally, the cruise ship folks like to send cash home to their families back. And this was 20 years ago, right? And so do you remember, Heather, we tried to introduce pay cards back then, 20 some years ago. It failed miserably. Nobody touched, it was so ahead of its time. Nobody wanted to touch it because they wanted cash. And it was just a crazy thing. So you were doing a lot of I remember you did a lot of expat work too with the expat team. We had a heavy expat population. It was quite interesting.
And there was also pressure too, because you had to have everything ready for when the ship came into Port Canaveral.
Yes.
And it had to be in that lockbox, waiting to go. Otherwise, they're waiting another week or two or whatever.
Yes.
And
Yeah. I mean, look, I think it was really a stellar experience. And I think we all learned just so much. The other day I was on with the Payroll Baddies, Julie. We're getting them on the show, by the way. You guys got to watch out for that episode. I was on the Payroll Baddies and they asked me about, which is an SAP show, by the way, asked me one of my favorite payroll crazy nightmare stories or whatever. And I told the story of Jimmy Kimmel getting the 1 penny check. Do you remember that when he first went on air, it was I think our second year, it was 2003, 2004. I remember cutting his bonus on a signing bonus. And basically what had happened was in Hollywood, you have a lot of, it's hard to explain. Let's take George Clooney, for example. George Clooney does a lot of work for Warner. I did some consulting for Warner after Disney. He basically could be in their system, same at Disney, in 3 or 4 different ways as entirely different types of records. He could be a producer. He could be a director. He could be an employee. He could be whatever, just staging. It could do anything. Many of them also operate through DBAs and LLCs, right? So they're basically production entities. And so you may be paying a production entity versus a person, but a person is at the other end of that. And there's all sorts of different ramifications that go into that. And so
some of those DBAs and LLCs too.
So they get checks. They get checks.
Yeah.
They get residuals. They get regular payments. Like, for example, if Tom Cruise comes on Oprah or The View, we have to pay him for that time and make contributions to his health and welfare and all that. And it could be very small amounts. It could be big amounts. It just depends on what it is. Well, an AP check for residuals or some sort of thing that had to go out to Jimmy Kimmel went out as 1 penny. Okay. And it probably could have been right. I don't really know. but it accompanied by a letter going back to our change management. And I don't know who wrote this letter, probably someone from what we called the Tomorrowland Project, right? So this was the project that was overarching for all of this transformation in the company, was called the Tomorrowland Project. So the Tomorrowland Project would often produce these communications by way of people like me, right? The process owner. So likely the process owner for that sent that out, and it was just full of acronyms, right? Full of acronyms. And he read it on air as part of the opening monologue. And he said, I think his exact words were, I'm pretty sure, he goes, I really don't know what any of this means. He goes, but I'm pretty sure it means that they're putting an SAP to get rid of all the stupid people at Disney. It didn't go down well. It didn't go down well. But it was kind of like, I thought it was kind of a fun lesson in change management, that you need to communicate better. And again, there was so many change management opportunities. I feel like that's another degree that I got at Disney, was change management. And so that was a fun one. But man, we had it all, Julie. We had missed FedExes. We had poor mapping on GL that didn't get testing in parallel, that somebody overlooked, that just the craziest things. And really, I think we learned so much and I'll just go on record to say, you don't have to share your age, Heather, but I just tell people I was 28 years old when we were doing this. I don't know if people know that. 29. I was a child. Looking back, what were they thinking? What were they thinking? Now, I had 10 years experience. I was worldly experienced, but I didn't understand that. And I think back, and it was such a trial by fire, but gosh, it was so worth it. It was so worth it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think I was like 24, 25
we were kids
at the time. Yeah.
We were kids.
And most of us were in our 20s. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That's when you have the energy for this stuff. It isn't for naught that folks join the, the big four and the accounting firms, and they like drive them into the ground, because you have this energy and this vigor for going out and doing stuff. So, hey, it was your time, guys.
Yeah, it was such a formative time for me. I spent you gotta imagine the first 13 to 14 years of my career, I spent in the Marines, in PEO, and then at Disney. I got a really good foundational lesson on how to curate culture and people, and do things the right way in HR. And I'm so blessed for the opportunity. And look, it doesn't hurt to have the sexiness of Disney on your resume by any means. But all that aside, we really got a lot of great experience out of it, I think. So
one thing I learned, I think, on the opposite side was that there were a lot of people who had worked at Disney for a very long time. And I used to joke around that it's like Monsters, Inc. with Roz, the character, like, the where's your paperwork?
Yeah.
And I was just like, I don't want to be that person.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So like, try to bring some positivity into it.
Yes, man. We did it all. Man, remember the time we had, so Julie, do you remember when the hurricanes all crisscrossed Florida in 2004? Yeah. Charlie and all that came up Charlotte. You can still see the damage there in Port Charlotte Harbor, or Charlotte Harbor, from all that. I moved there right after that happened. We were processing humanitarian checks to the cast members. The Disney Company is outstanding about helping their people, and just so many things they do that is so forward. Same-sex benefits were in place like in the late 90s, and just so many things. And we were processing checks throughout that hurricane to try to pay people for just to keep they had no electricity. They couldn't get money out of the ATM. It was just crazy stuff, so great experience. But Heather, look, I know we got to put that away. I could reminisce with you all day, and it's awesome, right? It is fun. But I want to talk about how you and I got reunited. I want you to tell that story, because I still think, my wife thinks it's the funniest thing. And just talk about what you're doing now.
Yeah. So just as a preface, so when I worked for Pete, as he said, he was, fresh out of the Marines, basically. So still pretty buff and, high and tight and no facial hair whatsoever. So
I did have it. Yep.
Yeah. I started working for a company called Empower that was then acquired by Kronos. I was at our like customer appreciation event, which was a Kelly Clarkson concert, and I'm going down the buffet line, like, what should I get? What should I get?
This is Vegas at the Hard Rock.
That's right. Yeah.
Kronos. What was it back then? Kronos.
Works.
Something.
Kronos
Works. Yeah. Before the UKG Aspire days.
Yeah. So. There's just, suddenly I hear somebody say, "Hi, Heather," from across from me. And
we were eating the buffet line.
We were, yeah.
We're getting food.
And it's, I've been there a couple of years, and sometimes, people just say, "Hi, Heather," and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I totally forget."
I know.
So you have to try to do the very, subtle way of looking down at somebody's name badge, and I'm just looking at it, and my brain is going, "What?" Because there's, like Pete, with a ponytail
Flowy
and a
hair.
goatee, and I'm like, "Wait a minute, are you
Yeah.
Pete?"
Who is this person? Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened to high and tight Pete?
Ah.
I know.
He's gone hippie on us, rogue
in, in
hippie.
my in my 40s, about 10 years ago, I decided to just stop cutting my hair, and here it is. Here we are. The rest is
Yeah.
history, as they say. But yeah, so that's how we got reunited over a buffet table at a Kelly Clarkson concert at the now closed
Yeah.
Hard Rock. Actually, I
Yeah.
think it's the Virgin. It's a
I
Virgin
think
hotel now.
so, yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
my boss told me the next day, he was like, "Oh my gosh, Heather, I took a bunch of videos of Kelly Clarkson singing, and all I can hear is either you singing along or you and Pete being like, 'Oh, that guy, yeah!'" And, like, catching up and
We
reminiscing.
did. We were catching up the entire time watching Kelly Clarkson, who's phenomenal, by the way. Shout out Kelly Clarkson.
Yeah, she
I
just played
wouldn't.
Aspire last year too. She's
Oh,
fantastic still.
yeah. Good
I've
for
seen her
her.
at
Good
the
for her.
ADP meeting in the mines in
Yeah.
Nashville.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Rent
yeah,
the whole bar, the big shindig. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's our story. So we bond every year over HR Tech or a
yeah,
Paycon or whatever event. And I've now gotten Heather invited. There's always a UKG private analyst sort of happy hour at HR Tech. She's become a fixture of that.
yeah,
I've made sure that she's invited so I can catch up with her. But yeah, it's just so awesome. And yeah, I want to talk about what you're doing now though, because you're out there building product for the future.
yeah.
I know obviously at UKG, but talk a little bit about what your role is and how did you get into product? And what's the difference between how different is it from obviously going from service to, to actually creating the soup, if you will, the cake?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I actually started in implementation for payroll and HR for that company, Empower. And I just dug in so much. We had two product managers, and one of them opened a position and called me and said, "So Heather, I opened this position for you, right?" I was like, "Oh, I did not." And that was right around when ACA reporting came out. So I remember like talking with the CIO, and he was like, "Well, who's going to take ACA?" And I'm like, "Well, they're both really swamped, so me, I guess." Yep. So yeah. So then Kronos acquired us, and I got a temporary offer just because I knew ACA, and our president at the time was like, "Nobody else can do this. Like we need her to do this." And then eventually wound up getting a position with Kronos product also. So I started as ACA, and then like kind of moved away from payroll. Although every so often people are like, "Don't you miss payroll?" I'm like, kind of, but
No.
not.
The abuse of it all. Oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I work for UKG has two main platforms. There's the Legacy Pro that was former Ultimate. I work for UKG Ready, which is we're interesting. We're geared more towards the SMB. So it's like true to my heart and my background. Where like I said, I was doing payroll and HR stuff and AP stuff and all of that. And people, I get to meet them at our customer events and they tell me about their days and my eye just starts twitching and I go, "I'm
I
sorry,
know.
it's not you. It's just like it's a little PTSD, I promise."
I know, right? I know. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of UKG ready. We are, one platform for everything that you need. I mean, I remember that too. I like at that company, we used ADP with the big wheel. Remember the big wheel?
yeah.
That we used that for payroll. Then we used Kronos for time clocks at that point too. There were other ones for GLs and all of that. And yeah, I went through several implementations on the side of the house of being a payroll manager too. Like I started a job after Disney, and the first day they said, "Hey, we're transitioning to PeopleSoft. Here's everything."
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Good
Like,
luck.
Okay.
oh, day one. Like, don't you want to see my IDs first?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
How different is thinking? I mean, how much? I mean, I know it must help, but how different is thinking about building the product than actually using the product? I mean, I know it's kind of a goofy question, but do you know what I mean? Like, do you lean on that practitioner experience more than you probably realize, or do you feel like you're more looking at it a different lens in some way?
I think we do, yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of the product folks, on our side, we did have some kind of, practitioner or, going
Yeah.
through like either support or services too. So we know the pain points. So, we're at a point where, we say, okay, this is what we need to build. We partner with our engineering, we partner with our user experience. And then,
Yeah.
it's kind of up to us to be the voice of the customer too.
Yeah.
Like there's been a few times where it's just, oh, hey, this is what we're going to do. And no, we can't do that. Nobody's going to use that, or
Yeah.
like nobody has time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Julie, we've talked about this. I complain a lot about, I understand there's going to be new people always coming into industries, but one of the things that bothers me about the HR tech industry is that you have a lot of folks running marketing and product and stuff that have absolutely no experience, which is okay. Okay, not to have practitioner experience, it's not the end of the world. There's great software developers that have built wonderful things that never had any actual experience. But I find that those that have experience have an entirely different lens and an entirely different respect. And I use that word emphasis, is I don't know that some of the firms building the solutions today actually respect the problem that they're solving. And I think you can see it in some of the arrogance in some of these things. I wish we could get more practitioners to make the jump, but that's an interesting conundrum because so many folks don't have the skill. And I don't want to say don't have the skills, don't risk or step outside their comfort zone to try and take their experience and use it in a different manner. I think too many people think, well, I'm only a payroll manager or an HR manager. I could never develop software. I could never, whatever. And I think they can. They're the best people to do that. They're the best people to be marketing it and speaking to the audience or speaking to the public.
Heather's implementation experience to me is kind of a key in making that leap, because that it's almost like the business analyst of yore, where you have to be able to talk, both business and techie languages. And in implementations, you really get a sense for, okay, something's been developed, there's product. Now I have to apply it and make it work in production and see how that works. And when it doesn't, I have to go back and try to communicate to product to figure out, get this right, will you? You're making my life miserable. So I feel like that's the missing link, right? Between those couple of worlds.
And Pete, I find too that like what you were saying, with hiring the ABC team, it's the people who have the attitudes of, yes, I can do this. Yes, I'm willing to learn. Willing to learn is huge.
Right.
Yeah. And, I always tell people too who are new to product, like the first time that you put something in the system and it works, you're like, did that.
I know. That's so it's got to be great to see that come to life. And again, I mean, I think it's special because you've lived all these same problems that these folks are trying to solve for. Do you think it's? I actually think it's very similar. It's actually almost harder back then. But do you think it's harder now with all the compliance, all the just the chaos, the employee experience, just so many layers of complexity now? Do you think it's any different than it was back then, or were we just dealing with less? We had the same complexity, we just have different maturity of tech, so it made it harder. I don't know. I haven't decided yet whether it's getting easier or not, I guess.
Yeah.
I hope it is.
And I'm going to use those two little letters that everybody like, AI, right?
Yep.
Yeah. But what's interesting is I've definitely seen like our customers' attitude towards AI change.
Mm-hmm.
Like I used to like AI used to come up. My husband, huge fan of the '80s, would always scream, "Skynet, Skynet!" I'd like from Terminator. Yeah. But I like even just like a year ago, I remember, because we want to work on our performance reviews, and I remember talking to some of our customers and saying, "Hey, what would you think about bringing AI in to like, kind of just, gather like." Take all the feedback together and kind of give you a summary so you don't have to read each thing individually. And about a year ago, it was no, 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 no. I don't want that. I need to be reading everything myself. I need to, read it before it goes to back to the employee because I need to make sure everything is written properly. And now here we are, like, a year later, and they're like, okay, so how are we using AI?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely a change in that. And I a little personal win was my mother was like, I'm never using AI. And I just kind of talked about ChatGPT for like 30 minutes. And then I get a text from her like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I'm like, okay.
I remember people saying, I'll never text. I'll always call.
How about I'll never use a cell phone, right?
I know. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, I want to ask you two a question while we're on this, because I just thought of this. And Julia, it's probably maybe a little bit more for you too, or equally for you, is one of the things I've seen a few of my vendors telling me, and this is especially true, I'd say, in global payroll, but maybe even, I can't remember the other area that it was brought up to me a couple weeks ago, is we're starting to see some buyers say, we want to see a proof of concept. Um,
Oh,
and I
and
don't
getting
know,
paid for
is that
not.
something you guys, or either of you guys, are seeing at this point? I had a vendor, really, one of my clients, reach out and say, hey, how should we be thinking about this? We're seeing more of it. Do you think that's because of AI now? I feel like it might be.
So I'll tell you where I hear it. I don't know if this is the context you mean. One of my sons is an engineer, and as you know,
Hmm.
there's a lot of folks doing gig work, in
Yeah.
the economy, and part of their interviews, have been to solve a problem or
Yeah.
do something as a proof of concept. And the controversial aspect of that is, okay, but that's above and beyond. And if they're going to use the output, and we're not getting paid for it, it's just the
Yeah.
promise of a job. Is that the context that you're
No,
thinking
I
about
think
here?
we've got vendors out there who are getting into RFP situations where there's a request in the down select, there's a
Oh,
request
I
for a
see.
proof of concept. I've heard it a couple of times in global payroll now, and I heard it in one other area, and I don't remember what it was. And I was really surprised by that. And now I have heard it in global payroll before. I have heard it. But I just thought it was interesting. So just keep an eye on that, because I don't know if there's a there, but do you see any of that, Heather? I mean, I know the SMB might not be so much into that, but do you guys experience any of that right now?
I think probably what it is like global payroll is a big concept, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, don't just check the box and tell me that you support it. Like, I
Yes.
want to know how you do it. And yeah, I mean, we are definitely seeing more SMBs branching out too. Like, and that was a COVID thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, so if everybody can work from home, why do we have to limit ourselves to this, geographical
Yeah.
market? Like,
Yeah.
let's open up to everything. So yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot of multinational, smaller companies.
Yeah.
I actually have an example, Pete, now that you clarified, and it's in an RFP situation, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
involves multiple vendors. And I would say take any of the buzzwords, whether it's AI or API.
Hmm.
And in this situation, we're working with a client that has some very specific thoughts about how an API needs to work and recognizes that providers have a lot of marketing language around APIs and whether they're bidirectional or not, or how unlimited they are. And all of that can mean a bag of nothing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so usually those things get sussed out in due diligence toward the end after you've done the rest of your product rigor. But I will tell you, I've had at least one situation where we've pulled some of that sandboxing or, proof of concept, as you said,
Yeah. Yeah.
forward because when it's a knockout criteria, then why do you want to go through all the rigor of seeing all the functionality? And, there's sometimes that's less differentiating
Yeah.
than something that is truly a knockout criteria for a client. So
Yeah.
still not the regular course of action in searching for providers, but there are instances where it certainly makes sense, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. I'm going to keep an eye on it. I'm curious to see if I'm going to ask some of my other clients about it, my vendor clients, and talk about that and see what's
Yeah,
going
we have
on
a
there.
QBR, not next week, but the week after. I'm going to
Yeah.
talk to pre-sales about that too. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to
Mhm.
know. I'd love to know, because
Yeah.
I think it could be AI induced in a way. I think there could be some, prove it, right? Let's see it in
Right.
action against our data, right? I love when the demos can include a client data.
Mhm.
Those are really powerful. And I think that might be what we're talking about here. So I'm gonna poke around on that a little bit more. But Heather, one of the things I want to talk to you about is, and I know this plays really well right into UKG's go to market, but ironically, but I really love the rise of workforce management in conjunction with payroll. Right, we're not just talking about solving for payroll; we're talking about solving for both. Because as most people know or may not know, much of the sector specific elements of payroll happen to normally sit in the time side, and for a lot of companies, gross to net would be super simple if they could just get the scheduling and the time entry brought in right, and all the the build to gross done properly. So I love that that's maturing, and that companies are starting to look at those in tandem. But what do you see with that? How much more do you see time being bought together with payroll now?
Well, I mean, UKG Ready being a legacy Kronos,
Yeah,
like time is
it's
in the
key.
majority of
Yeah,
our
yeah,
deals, right? Like if people would say to me, "Who do you work for?" Kronos. They're like, "Oh," I'm like, "Do you have a time clock on the wall?" They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Does it say Kronos?" They're like, "I think it does." Like, yeah. But yeah, Pete, as as somebody who gets kind of sneak peeks too, you'll see that we are definitely moving towards kind of a more synergized payroll and and time situation too,
Yeah.
with the system doing more on behalf of the admin. Like I
Yeah.
think that like our payroll value stream owner, I sat in on a presentation that he did, and he showed the number 34, and he's like, "What do you think this is?" And everybody was like, "Well, throwing number." And he said, "This is the number of pages that you could go to just in running a regular payroll, just because there's
Oh my
so
goodness.
much to look at, right? Like you want to are all the punches in, or is this in, is that in, yeah."
Yeah.
And having the system be able to kind of take care of that for you. Like, I mean, I remember every Monday I would come in and be like, "These are your missing punches," and sending out
Yeah.
email to everybody, and again, showing my age.
No, I agree. I agree. Yeah, one of the things I think I really love is that workforce management is becoming more of a COE too. Maybe not so much down market, but it's definitely happening up market. I've actually got something coming out on this, and we're bringing on what ironically is a happens to be a UKG customer who has built a very transformative WFM COE. I'm really excited to speak to her and bring her on. So we'll be sharing that pretty soon. But Julie, do you see that happening? Like, do you see more conversations about WFM being a COE?
Oh, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And even I've even seen different area. It's confusing. It's confusing when you talk about it
Yeah.
as a COE, just because you're thinking about it from the all work model, right? Like no,
Hmm.
shared services is
Yeah.
that leg, and yet the concept is the same. I just had this academic conversation recently where it's like, but we are a center of expertise. Yes, you're a center of the transactional expertise
Yeah.
in comp, in payroll, in the things that sit, in the shared services. But yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
a little bit of a trend there.
Interesting. Yeah, I love it. There's so much power in that data, right? That strategic workforce management data. I know that's something you guys are. I think we talked about on our UKG update. I know that's huge for you guys, and I'm seeing more organizations really want to tap that, especially when it comes to, those gnarly manufacturers, healthcare companies that have those frontline workers that are really out there and deskless, right? Not able
Yeah.
to do what we normally do on a computer, but. So I want to ask you this. Let's do a little sidebar here. Chicken or egg? Center of expertise or center of excellence? What do you
Ooh.
guys say? Gartner says excellence, I think.
I feel like when you said expertise, I feel like I thought, oh, I thought
I
it
think
was
it's
excellent.
excellence. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember what Deloitte says. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is. Yeah. Anyway,
It could be excellent expertise.
you know what we mean. You know what we mean. Yeah. Just COE. You know what it is. Yeah. Anyway. So look, Heather, let's talk about AI for a minute because look, you've seen the past, right? Now you're living sort of developing the future. What are your thoughts? Like what are you excited about? What are you concerned about?
I mean, so the concern always is like there's so much data. Who's having access to that data? What are they going to do with the data?
Yeah.
But it is really exciting stuff too. Like we're at a point too where like we as product managers can use certain platforms and kind of build a little bit of a mock-up on our own.
Hmm.
And then this way we can, really start talking about the requirements, even sooner, quicker with our engineers and, our
Yeah.
UX department still definitely needed. We're not doing it. Yeah. But yeah, it's a different way to work, and it's kind of taking out, because sometimes we find that there's a lot of time spent of like, kind of administrative stuff, or just, asking questions, answering questions that probably should have been asked, in the very beginning when we were grooming stuff, not when we're developing,
Yeah.
but being able to focus more on that so that you can have those conversations even sooner. We kind of see as things are going to come out even faster too.
Yeah. Yeah. How much are clients wanting to give input into how you're developing your AI? Do you see that engagement?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
definitely an inquisitivity, I feel like, from them, the buyers I speak to and folks that are out there, especially at conferences and whatnot. Everyone's obviously got either a mandate to do something, a curiosity to do something, or in some cases are paralyzed in doing nothing. But that's
Right.
always going to be that's always going to be the case, So
Yeah, UKG is really great. They give us tons of training too.
yeah,
Like I know that there are some people who are like, I don't understand how AI applies to my job, but I'm
yeah,
going to take the training anyway, and kind of build that
yeah.
tool for myself. Yeah,
I would recommend that to everyone. There's so many good, the Databricks, Google. I've taken some of the Databricks classes, Google, LinkedIn Learning. I
yeah,
think Microsoft. You can absolutely go out there and get so much free education. It's really on. There's no excuse, I guess, is what I would say. If you have a curiosity, go fill that because there's plenty. And I almost feel like, Julie, I can't do enough of them. I'm always trying to catch one every now and again. If I'm like, somewhere bored and in a waiting room, I'll like pop on a LinkedIn Learning or something. But I love that though about this technology because I feel like it's sort of like a blank palette. Like there's no right or wrong answer for how to. Well, hopefully there's some wrong answers for how to use it, but
yeah.
fundamentally make it yours. I guess is what I'm saying, and I think that's what excites me about HR tech is I feel like this is it is and it isn't, but it's somewhat of a reset button. It's a chance for us to as practitioners and leaders to go, hey, forget all what we've been doing. Like, what do we want to be doing around what we have to be doing? And how does those two things reconcile? Um,
hmm
there's a blank palette, right? Paint your picture, I think, for
Yeah,
you. So,
and a lot of the stuff that I've been reading and hearing too is, like, that there are people who are concerned, is my job going to be replaced by AI?
yeah.
And I think that we've all seen that, no, that's not gonna be the case. There always needs to be some human interaction. But,
Hmm.
if it could help, if it can take the payroll admins, give them an extra 2 to 3 hours every
Yeah.
Monday morning because they don't have to chase missing punches, like, let's do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I saw a quote too that AI is not going to replace people. People using AI will replace people who
That's
don't
right.
use AI. Yeah,
That's right. That's
yeah.
right.
And I think people are, like my mom, she was like, I'm never using AI. I'm like, do you use Google, mom? She's like, yeah. I'm like, that little summary at the top,
Yeah.
Gemini? She's
Yeah.
like, yeah. I'm like, that's AI.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think people realize that sometimes. I
Right.
think it's become so innocuous and just symbiotic in our lives that we don't pay attention to the fact that Spotify and Netflix and Apple, if you have the iPhone, is actually using AI in the background and you're feeding it data all the time. Right. And
Yeah.
so
hmm
there's really nothing to be fearful of. I think it's just about being smart about what data you're giving it, just like it would be any app when you give it and what permissions you want to
Part of
provide.
that is whether you have to be
Yeah.
intentional about it or whether it's
Yeah.
there and it's doing its thing despite you, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we people are becoming very conversant in, well, AI can do this and AI can do that, but then you ask them, like, okay, so why don't you use AI to do this? And they're like, where do I even go to get
Yeah.
AI?
hmm
Like there's this bit that's of hands-on that is, you can graduate and be a manager, but if you have never done the job of the people that you're managing, you might ought to step back and figure out how the heck do I do this myself at some
Yeah.
point in
Yeah.
time.
You know what's interesting? I was looking at some data the other day on something that I'm working on, and one of the interesting thing was it showed some of the sectors that are a little bit more ahead, and manufacturing was one that was a bit more ahead on automation, and particularly in the back office, in addition to the front, because they're trying to do the smart manufacturing, and now they're bringing it to the back office, and certainly looking for efficiencies there. So I think some sectors are going to get ahead of others. And that's going to be interesting to see how that evolves because that's going to have impacts to a lot of things. So I'm hoping everybody's getting on getting on board and doing the right thing. So
Yeah, what we do, just within Ready product too, and we've actually opened it up to some other folks in the organization too.
yeah,
I feel like AI is one of those things, like Julie, you were saying, where you're like, oh, you can do this, but I don't know how,
Yeah.
or like,
yeah,
oh, AI is great, but I can't really kind of come up with an example. So every other week we have an AI happy hour, dry. Let
oh,
me just
cool,
say that. Yeah.
yeah,
But we get together and it's just like a sharing of,
yeah, yeah,
hey,
yeah,
I did this with AI or I did that. And, like we're like, hey, we took our community ideas and we, instead of spending hours going through a spreadsheet, we asked AI to summarize. And now we know what direction we need to take this particular area of the product down.
No, it's
Yeah.
good. I think it's experimentation to get over that fear and
Right.
and the trust too, because I think that's the root of all this for payroll and HR. It should be for anything. Is can you trust what it's doing and what it's saying and what it's feeding you, and can you challenge it in the right way and go, wait a minute, and that's what we're going to need, right? I don't see how you're going to have no one managing payroll, right? You're going to have people overseeing the AI and saying, wait a minute, this doesn't pass the smell test. This doesn't seem reasonable.
Right.
Or based on my knowledge, that can't be true. Or at least just test it and see. And so, yeah, I just hope we don't rush and throw the baby out with the bathwater, because we've seen some companies already like, oh, we're firing everybody and we're just putting in AI, or we're ripping out this software and we're just going to throw in AI. And it's too early, first of all, but second of all, I think throwing out all that human intelligence is really the biggest tragedy
An
of that
experience.
decision. It really is, and especially in payroll, right? Especially in HR, that sort of thing. There's the expertise is so valuable here. So yeah. So look, Heather, what's next for you? Are you going to be out on the trail, that tech trail? I think you said you got some vacation, but where are we going to see you at? Where can we connect in person?
Yeah. I will be at UKG Aspire.
Okay.
They're in Vegas. Yeah. I'm usually at HR Tech, but like I said,
Yep.
I wound up scheduling some PTO.
Yes.
And out and about. Actually, I think I have a local conference here in Florida at the end of the month too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good. Everybody should connect with you, get to see you guys, and certainly come by. There's always a lot of fun going on at the UKG booth. I got a wonderful sun hat the other day when we saw Julie. She was kind enough to give me her bucket hat, so I'll take that one to the beach. But we really appreciate you, Heather. Where can folks connect with you? LinkedIn, I take it. Anywhere else?
Yep. LinkedIn. I used to be on X and then
Gave that up. Okay.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
No worries.
But LinkedIn is the best place. Yeah.
All good. All good. Well, listen, thank you so much. Heather, I love you to death. I could keep talking to you forever. We got stories for days, but I know we got to get going. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and keep doing what you're doing. I'm really proud of you. You've come a long way. We've all come along. We've all grown up. You know what I mean? We're just kids. We're just kids running payroll. Good grief, man. I think back on it, and it's such a great experience. But what made it so cool was just all the people. We had such a stellar group. I really am proud of that. So thank you so much for coming on and let me geek out a little bit with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And Julie, it was wonderful to meet you. And
yeah, awesome. Well, we'll see everybody soon. And don't forget to like, subscribe, share, rate, do whatever you can. Give us some interaction. We could use it, and we will be back with more great guests like Heather.